Cowboys Nation, welcome to Sons of the Star. First of all, I'd just like to say playoffs, playoffs. You talk about playoffs? We can't even win a game.
That's the
Yes,
truth.
we are here. We are here. We are live. Immediately following the drumming of the Packers laid on us in AT&T Stadium. Final score: the Packers 48, the Cowboys 32. The Cowboys suffer a heartbreaking loss at home, um, in the hopes of a potential, at least the NFC championship run we were expecting. The Cowboys were 7.5 point favorites, and here we are, suffering another loss to the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs. So we we're debating whether to do a show or not tonight, but um, we're going to keep it going here and do a little venting tonight. So Cowboy Reg, your immediate reactions to this game and how it all went down and how are we feeling? I can't imagine we're feeling good.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I wouldn't say shocking because we've been through it before, so it's not shocking, right? I mean, this feeling,
Hmm.
you've been there before, so it's kind of familiar, but it's disgusting. I don't know, effort was poor, game plan was horrid, in-game adjustments by the coaching staff, pitiful. The whole thing is disgusting.
Yeah,
Sick to my stomach.
I think the only life we saw in when the game started until the game ended. If you were watching, yeah, exactly. We're gonna Cowboys Nation. We're gonna need a lot of that to cope tonight. Um, but if you're watching the
Good
Fox
old,
broadcast,
good old Texas ranch water.
yeah, there you go.
The only thing that
But
the only thing going well for me from Texas tonight is this
yeah,
ranch water.
if you were watching the Fox broadcast when they had Jimmy Johnson on at halftime, he gave a pretty fired speech. He actually said he cannot say what he would say to this team on live TV, but he gave a pretty fiery speech about what he would say to the team, and it's exactly like you just said. The effort was bad, and it's kind of just like, hey, do you want to? That's how I felt, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is do you have any pride in either the name on the front or the back of your jersey? And I'm not saying these guys do not have any pride, but that's how it looked from an outsider's perspective watching on TV. It just seemed like the effort wasn't there and the team kind of just gave up and fell into the um just fell into the role of, hey, we just choke and we're having a bad night. And I don't know, it just, and I get it's the NFL and these guys are making a lot of money and it's a football game at the end of the day, but you know, it was pretty surprising to me, especially with all the veteran leadership on this team. And it just kind of felt like they got punched in the mouth and they never responded. And I tried to stay positive when we went down early, but man, it just kept piling on. Um, so I a little speechless overall. Um, but let's try to break down the game, how it went from start to kind of finish, and how the score ended up being 48-32. So we both talked on last podcast how we wanted Green Bay to get the ball first, and we wanted to go out and the defense to make a stand. Yeah, I was pretty pumped up. Um, those first couple plays, we stuffed the run and we got in a third and long. Well, actually, there was a penalty on Deron Bland, but it felt like we were going to make a stop. We didn't, and we let Green Bay go down and score on that first possession, and they ate up a lot of clock, which is exactly what their game plan was. So, how are you feeling right off the bat, and how did you think the Cowboys came out and played right off the bat in that first drive?
Well, I was in denial because I thought,
Hmm.
no big deal. They went down and scored. We're going to come back and score, and that didn't happen. So, first stage for me was just denial, like that. That's not a big deal, but it was a big deal. Looking back on it, it was a big deal and big turning point, if you want to call it that, because it was so early. But for them to make a statement on our defense was just ran over all night, and running game, passing game didn't matter. Our defense had no answer, and that was
Yeah.
the first drive of the game. That was a great example of it.
Yeah, it was very weird on the defensive side because they did a lot of things well and a lot of plays. They either played a each down extremely well or they played just god awful, and there was just no in between. Um, I, d- at one point I had to turn off the game, so I don't know if they ever got a sack, but um, I guess we can look that up. But I don't think the defense ever forced a sack, and obviously we know that they had no turnovers. Um, let's see if I can look this up
Yeah, it's
quickly.
almost like they had so much
Yeah,
focus on
zero,
stopping
zero sacks,
the
zero
run,
sacks.
you know? Yeah. They thought, well, we're going to just stop the run, and they couldn't stop the run, even though they knew the run was coming. So therefore, they had no pass rush either. So looking back on it, maybe we got the cat over here trying to chime in, but looking back on it, why not just rush the passer and give up some yards in the run, and maybe we get a turnover or a couple sacks that turn the game around. And I don't know. I thought that's how we played all year, and then all of a sudden tonight it was a conservative effort on not giving up the big play, but giving them time to pass, and that was a bad combination.
Yeah, and Green Bay only ended up with 143 rushing yards. So it wasn't like we got gashed for 250, even three. I mean, if you look at the Green Bay scoring 48 points, you might assume that they rushed for 300 yards, but it was only 143 yards, which doesn't seem that bad to me. And I think in a lot of scenarios, we were looking at that 100-yard range saying, "Hey, if we can keep them to under 100 yards, I think we have a great shot." But even if you were to tell me that they were only rushing for 143, I would have still said the Cowboys have a great chance in this game. So, but it was like I just said, when it mattered and when they needed a big rush, they got it. And um, Aaron Jones continues his evil reign over the Cowboys, and it's just kind of shocking. You don't think these superstitious things matter, but apparently they do. And that's what we saw tonight. So pretty rough. Um, so Green Bay goes down and scores first, and like you said, you just kind of have to say, okay, that's not how we wanted the game to start, but it is what it is. Our offense will respond, and they did not. Um, and that first drive looked rough, and we looked out of sorts. Dak was throwing high. CD looked off, and they immediately, turned the camera into CD on the sideline, and something seems off right away. So, do you have any thoughts on what was wrong with CD tonight? Um, my wife and I were talking, maybe he was sick or something. Like something was definitely wrong right off the bat. Did you have that feeling too, or did he just have an off game, or was it more on Dak?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the both of them being off, but we've seen this before, unfortunately, with Dak in the big game, overthrowing, rushing throws, and just throwing bullets when they could have been, mid-range balls. And he came out, he overthrew CD, threw it too hard. CD should have caught it. So I blame
Mhm,
both of them for that early. But Dak was overthrowing people all night. He just like It's like San Francisco all over again, but this is not San Francisco. This is the seven
mhm,
seed.
yeah,
So that really concerns me about Dak's big game performances. And CD didn't help him, but I think in the long run, I'm gonna blame this more on the leader and say that Dak didn't step up when he needed him tonight.
yeah. I do think it was a little bit on both, and I have to fault the play calling a little bit because this has been a team all year where we established the running game based off of establishing the passing game first. And for some reason tonight, we decided to be a run first offense, which we haven't been all year. And our rush looked pretty good tonight. And I think Tony Pollard had a good game overall. I mean, he didn't have the chance to get very involved because they're always playing from behind. But right away, I thought he was playing pretty decently. But we kept ending up in third down situations, and it's like you said, Dak wasn't throwing the ball very accurately. Um, and that eventually leads to the interception on the next drive. And to me, I know we can. we can talk about the refs. Oh, first of all, if there's any positives that come out of tonight, and if you listen to the last podcast, I did call that they would call a holding on Micah Parsons, and we got two. And if you were to
in the
guess that
first
before the
quarter.
game
Yeah.
in the first quarter, so if there's, if there was a prop bet out there, I never found one, but I could have cashed in on that. Um, but that ended up not being a difference in the game at all, which is pretty shocking because if I were to tell you that there were two holding calls against Micah Parsons in this game, you probably would have think the Cowboys won by 20 plus points. But here we are. But the next pursuing drive by the Cowboys, Dak throws an interception. To me, that seemed like a lot of contact. And I thought that should have been a pass interference, but what do you do? And that gives Green Bay a short field, and they go down and put up a quick 14-0 lead, and we're all sitting there kind of like we just seen a ghost at that point. The demons were creeping back in, and the doubt was starting to, um, creep back in from a fan base and the team. So, um, thoughts on that first interception? Did you see the pass interference or the holding, or am I just kind of am I making excuses for Dak?
I didn't see it live. They had to slow it down for me to see it, which tells me
Hmm.
that it's not enough to complain about. If the ref makes that call there, I would agree with it, but it's a 50-50 ball. Um, I, I I don't know if the blame goes on Dak per se, but maybe a good play. I mean, maybe just a good
Yeah,
play by the
it
defense there.
was. Yeah, yeah. I mean, plenty of credit we'll have to go around tonight for the Packers overall. I mean, on both sides of the ball, they played great. And we talked about Jair Alexander before on the preview episode. And he was a game time decision, and he came out and he played pretty well. So that was a good play on him, and they go down and score. Um, so that makes it
Well, I want
14-0.
to say that as well as he played, I did predict that he would re-injure that ankle making a tackle.
Yeah,
So, I
you
mean,
did.
it didn't happen early enough in the game to make an impact, but I did say that if he did come back, that he may have to make a physical play that could put him out, and it did. But it was too late to make any impact for us.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there were opportunities in that second half, but it just seemed like it was pretty much a foregone conclusion just because, the offense definitely came to play in the second half, but the way that the defense is playing, it's just like, they're pretty much able to score in an unlimited amount of points. And if you look back at this game, the Cowboys were making that it was garbage time, but they were making somewhat of a comeback. I would consider it a comeback. But the defense did not help them out. And we talked about how important it would be to play complementary football in this game, and there was absolutely none of that. Um, every time the offense played bad, the defense would fall. They weren't helping them out except for maybe in the first quarter when they got a stop, but that was pretty much the only stop they had all night. I think there was probably two punts overall tonight, but one of them was in garbage time. Um, and then on the offensive side of the ball, they weren't helping out the defense either. So overall, bad complementary football. Which leads us to our next point. The Cowboys are driving down 14-0, and um, no, I'm sorry. The Packers stopped the Cowboys, and they're able to go down and score again on a 10-play, 93-yard drive and go up 20-0. And at this point, we are in full panic mode, I would say, because the offense is not clicking. The Green Bay Packers defense, which all year hasn't proved to be a great squad, they're looking like world beaters, and the Cowboys can't do anything on offense. And now we're down 20-0. But at the same time, you realize that we have the chance to, double dip like we talked about in the pregame. And if we can just kind of get it together, we can score some points. Um, but the Cowboys are down 20-0. And then again, I should have shut my mouth, but I was speaking it into existence and I said the words, this feels like the time where Dak Prescott throws a pick six. And I guess I should have tweeted it, but that's exactly what happened. I promise you that's what I said. And that's what happens. And and Darnell Savage ends up with a 64-yard pick six, and the Cowboys are down 27-0. So at this point, what are you thinking? Because I'm past the point of pain, and I'm just kind of laughing about this, thinking to myself, like, this doesn't even feel real. This feels like a bad dream. So what did you think about 27-0? And that was a terrible pass by Dak.
Well, I'm gonna tell you exactly what I'm thinking. That's ball game. And
Mhm.
it's literally ball game because they double dipped after that. They scored a touchdown at the end of the second half, the second quarter rather, and then they came back and scored a field goal to start their opening drive in the third quarter. That's a 10-point possession there between the two. But they gave up the pick six before that,
Yeah.
which pretty much nullified the double dip. So Dak doesn't throw that pass. It was just a poor read on his part, poor pass. I expect that from rookie Dak, not 8 years in the league. He's better than that.
Yeah.
And then the game's
100%.
over because if he throws that ball away or if it's incomplete, we saw what they would do at the end of the half. They went down and scored a touchdown, and then they got the ball in the second half, scored a field goal. So that's the game right there. That went from a ball game to a blowout in that one poor choice by Dak.
Yeah, and to me, it seemed like he was forcing the ball to CD there, and it's almost like, hey, if your chemistry between you and CD is off tonight, it's been on all year, and everyone's talking about it, but hey, maybe it's not the time to force a ball to him, and and uh, and Darnell Savage read that like a book. I mean, he was all over that pass, and Dak was, it was a third and short, and he was forcing the ball to CD Lamb, and and I think if you're not on, that's fine. You actually said, um, in our preview show that, they might take CD out of the game, but we can make up for it with, um, Pollard, Rico Dowell, and Ferguson.
Fergie.
Um,
Yep.
but they didn't do that. And I think Fergie was our most they didn't involve him until we were down probably by 20 or 27 points. And
Yeah.
that's something that's gonna be questionable going forward. If it's not there, it's not there. But they tried to force it, and that's what happened. So the Cowboys are down 27-0. They put together a drive with no time remaining in the first half to make it 27-7. And at halftime, we are just kind of thinking that this is too much of a lead to overcome. The Cowboys get the ball first in the second half, and they're able to march down the field, but they come up kind of short and have to kick a field goal. And I felt like at that point you know, that was tough because you thought, okay, this game is probably over, but if we're able to come out in the second half and score, and the Packers offense hasn't been on the field in an hour, in real time, you could think the defense would come up with a stop, but they weren't able to punch it in, and it's 27-10. Um, Still a reachable comeback, but way more unlikely than 13 points. But again, the Packers go down and put together a five-play 75-yard drive and make it 34-10, and it's over at that point. The fat lady isn't singing, but she's warming up the vocals, so it's pretty much over. Um, and in the rest of the game, we don't need to really go drive by drive at this point, but the moral of the story is we couldn't stop them at all, and they kept continuing to score, and our offense was doing a few things, but they just couldn't make up for it. So the final score, um, the Cowboys, make that late push, and they're able to score, two kind of garbage time touchdowns while they're down 32 and make it a little bit interesting. And they could have made it an 8-point game late, but they weren't able to do that, and we're left with 48-32 final. Um, so let's talk about some of the stats from this game, and a lot of these will be kind of inflated on the Cowboys side because a lot of this was garbage time. But Jordan Love ends up 16 for 21 with 272 yards and three touchdowns. Aaron Jones is the leading rusher with 21 carries for 118 yards and three touchdowns. And Romeo Dobbs ends up with six receptions, 151 yards, one touchdown. Um, Dak ends up 41 for 60 with 403 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 2 very costly interceptions. Tony Pollard ends up with 15 carries, 56 yards, 1 touchdown, and CeeDee Lamb actually ends up with 9 receptions and 110 yards as the leading Cowboys receiver for the game. Um, Michael Gallup had a big game actually with
Yep.
6 receptions, 103 yards, and Ferguson ends up with 10 receptions for 93 yards. The Cowboys offense puts up over 500 yards and loses by 16 points. That kind of tells you everything you need to know right there. So who do you put this blame on more? Putting you on the spot here, but you put this game more on the offense or the defense?
First of all, shout out to Fergie. Correct me if I'm wrong. He also had 3 touchdowns.
Yes, he did. He had 3 touchdowns.
So he showed up. I thought Rico showed up. I thought Pollard showed up. And I thought those 3 would be the key to the game plan. And they were not the key until the game was out of hand. And then all of a sudden, oh, these 3 guys are working well. So
Yeah,
McCarthy blew it there. Terrible game plan on the offensive side. McCarthy was stubborn. He didn't adjust until it was out of hand, and then he found out too late that this was what would have worked. Dan Quinn, uh, let me know the cost of the airfare, and I will fly you to Seattle for your interview.
yeah,
You are a disappointment. You made 0 adjustments. You've done this before to us in the playoffs. You did it again. Your stubbornness did not work. Your soft zone coverage, your failure to figure out a pass rush, can't stop the run. Dan can go. Mike can go. I'm fine with it at this point. I don't have the answer. Who's the answer? I don't know. But their game
yeah,
plan sucked. Their in-game adjustment sucked. Clock management was terrible. We barely got that score at the end of the first half. They couldn't have
yeah,
managed the clock any worse than that. And we're down with 2 seconds with one play left. That should have never happened. And made a play there. But I blame both sides equal. And they probably both should go. I can't imagine Jerry's going to roll the same coaching staff out again another year. So
no.
there'll be big changes. Big changes coming.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we're gonna hop into that to kind of close this show out today. But it's hard to say on me if we're gonna keep the coaches out of it. I do. I am gonna blame the defense more than the offense, just because they had the opportunity to set the tone in this game and they weren't able to do so. Um, Very costly penalty on Deron Blaine on that first drive. I don't think he needed, and that was a legit penalty. I have some complaints with the refs, but that defensive holding on that first drive was legitimate. That was a hold on him, and it just felt like he was too fired up for the moment.
And
And
they
we've
wouldn't have made
seen,
the play anyways. It was unnecessary.
yeah, yeah, and so that was disappointing, but overall, like you said, a lot of it was on the scheme and that soft zone coverage. I did not understand. Guys were open down the middle all day long, and Jordan Love diced us up. And shout out to Jordan Love. You played a fantastic game, but at the end of the day, I think most NFL quarterbacks would have taken care of Dallas today. Um, the rush didn't get home. I'm just completely shocked that they never had a sack. That's just unheard of. I don't know what happened. Um, but here we are. I blame the defense more than the offense, with the
Yeah.
exception of, Dak is my boy. I've been a Dak lover since he's been a Cowboy, and I will continue to love Dak Prescott as a person. I think he's a fantastic person, and I root for him more than any other player in the NFL. I want him to succeed so badly, but he had a rough game and he made some costly mistakes. But overall, I blame the defense more because they had the chance to set the tone in this game and they failed to do so. And when you are at the level that this defense is at home, as a favorite, and you want to have the opportunity to be on the field first to set the tone in this game, and you failed to do so. So that defensive room, I think, cost us this game overall. And when the offense had some rhythm and they were starting to make a comeback, they just continually got gashed, and it felt like they gave up a little bit in my opinion. um, so I'm really disappointed in this Cowboys defense overall, and that's what I'll take away from this game. Um, but that's the game. That's what happened. It's a really, really disappointing ending to a pretty good season. it could have been a great season, but here we are. And again, I talked a lot of smack about the Packers, but they came out and they played well, and they showed us, and they're going to continue to laugh at us, and the whole world is going to laugh at the Cowboys for failing to make it anywhere in the playoffs this year. But it is what it is. We're going to continue. We're going to keep fighting. You know, we still have faith over here in Sons of the Star that the Cowboys will make it back one day. We're still gonna maintain our fandom. No one's jumping on another bandwagon here. Maybe for the playoffs, but that's about it because you got to have someone to root for. But here we are. We're out. We got bounced in the first round. Stephen A. Smith will laugh at us. Whatever. We're used to it. Um, but I guess first impressions, and we're gonna talk about coaching. But Cowboy Regg, where do you go from here as a Cowboys fan? And if you were in charge and if you were steering the ship, what would be some of the first moves that you make? I know you talked about it, you alluded to it already that you would have a little cleaning of the coaching staff, but where do you take this team from here? Because you have the weapons, you've gone 3 straight years of 12 wins, and you just the the playoff performance has gotten worse and worse, really. Um, so where do you go from here if you're the Cowboys franchise?
Well, I think you look at leadership first. Um, they failed to win home playoff games now. 2 years ago, hosting San Francisco. This year, hosting Green Bay. Um, you got to win those home playoff games. So something's going on at the top. So I support coaching changes, and I'm not a Dak denier. I'm not going to say that he doesn't choke in big moments like today, but I still support him, and I think he's a good quarterback. But I would say a new fresh set of eyes on these players, a new coaching staff, and if there needs to be an open quarterback competition in the preseason, I
Yeah.
would support that. See what Trey Lance has in the preseason. Make Dak go out and play in the preseason. Make him
Hmm.
compete for the job. Um, Something's wrong, so we got to figure it out. And just going rolling the same players and the same staff out there, you're going to get the same result. So changes need to be made. And I'm not getting paid to make those changes. Jerry needs to figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to get too involved in all the off-season transactions we need to look at, and we have a whole the good news is we have a lot of time in the off season, or our off season starts early. So in the next coming podcast, we can talk about what the Cowboys should go for in the 2024 draft, what kind of changes need to be made, what contracts are coming up that we need to make decisions on, and we can talk and speculate on all that. And I think that'll be a fun off season. It always is. Um, so I don't want to get too into that right now, but I totally agree that changes have to be made, and that comes from the top. And you can look at McCarthy's record and say, hey, he's had 3 straight 12-win seasons, and you know I give him a pass on the first 2 seasons, and you lost in the playoffs. You're a newer coach of the organization, but this was his year to move at least. I mean, you have to move. You absolutely have to move past the wild card round. You should move past the divisional round. And the only place you should lose as the Cowboys coach this year, if you're Mike McCarthy, is either in the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. I think that was the only way he keeps his job, and I think this is going to be it for him. I know he has 1 year left on his contract, but they will make some changes, and I don't think that really matters with the open coaching carousel that's out there right now. A lot of people are already pointing towards Bill Belichick coming to Dallas. I personally don't see that happening, and I think after the performance of this defense, we originally might have thought that, hey, maybe you just move Dan Campbell to the head coaching position, and you put
Dan Quinn,
what did I say? Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell. Hey, he might be
Oh boy.
available after tonight.
Yeah, good catch there. Dan Quinn. We would originally thought that, hey, maybe Dan Quinn can come in and take over as a head coach, but after the performance tonight, I don't think that's going to happen. So, where do you go from here? And
Well,
I
the
don't
only
know
good
if
thing
Bill,
about the only good thing about making Dan Quinn head coach is he can stop calling the defensive plays. So that would be a plus.
yeah, but and then you're going to have to bring in an offensive coordinator that's going to have to, well, I
Yeah.
mean, we have Brian Schottenheimer, but he hasn't been calling the plays this year. So you're going to have to bring in either stay with Schottenheimer and have him call and have total reign of the offense because that's something that Dan Quinn's never done. Um, if there's definitely coaches we want to keep. I'm a big Al Harris fan, and I really
Yeah.
hope that I would love for him to take over as defensive coordinator. Um, if
I
Quinn
think that's going to
goes,
happen.
yeah, because if you
Yes.
don't promote him, you're gonna lose him, I think. So I think they need to keep him. I think the players, buy in with him. And like you said, I put a lot of, blame on Dan Quinn tonight, and I think he kind of lost his job because, with all these Cowboys
Yep.
losses, you allowed offense, the defense has kind of been at fault for a lot of those. And when you play the style that he does, with a, hey, we're going to rush, we're going to play man coverage, but for some reason he got away from it tonight. I don't understand why. Why did we are the favorites in this game. Why do we change our identity? That doesn't make much sense to me. So there's a lot of blame to go around for this coaching staff, but I agree with you. I think you got to move on from McCarthy and you got to move on from Dan Quinn. It just is what it is. Maybe not so much with Dan Quinn, but definitely with McCarthy. You have to make a move. I don't know who that is yet, but
I mean, he's gonna interview elsewhere. He's gonna get offered a head coaching job somewhere else. And so that's that problem solved. And I think you just got to cut ties with McCarthy. You're not going to give him an extension. I mean, there's no
no.
no one in their right mind that could say let's give him an extension. So in his eyes, if he's not getting an extension, he's okay with walking away. So if they want to meet with
Right.
him and discuss it, I think he'll accept it and he'll get paid next year to go back home. I know he has a street named after him in Green Bay, and there's a Golden Corral on the corner. He can go hang out there and
Yeah.
get back on that buffet line, and he'll be just fine collecting his millions next year. But it's time to make changes and just have like I said, maybe an open quarterback competition. Maybe
Yeah.
light a fire under Dak. I don't know. He can't play any better than he did in the regular season, so I don't. I'm speechless on what to do with him. But get a
Yeah,
coach in there
and
we can trust, then they can take a look at the situation.
again, if we were relying solely on the offense to win games for us, then I think you could put all the blame on Dak tonight. But we, you really just, I think the play calling was bad. Starting, I think you should have got Dak some easy throws like we have seen all year and get him into a rhythm right away. And I think that if the defense was able to stop Green Bay at all, you could have let, the Cowboys back into this game. So, maybe I'm being biased because I like Dak a lot and I want him to succeed, but it'll be interesting. Do you want to start completely over? I mean, this is a very talented team that has shown success in the regular season. So, you want to make a quick change in something that's gonna matter. Um, but there are a lot of coaches out there, and I think, down the road we might come out with a podcast that just talks about the, potential coaches that are out there. I don't see Bill Belichick coming to Dallas. I don't think, that's something that he would do, but at the same time, what other team what other teams are out there that have the talent that the Dallas Cowboys have right now? I mean, if they do move on from Mike McCarthy, they're going to have a team. Maybe there's more coaches, there's coaching changes coming with some of there could be some other teams that get bumped early from the playoffs, but I think from the playoff teams that are in right now, with the exception of maybe the Steelers and potentially the Eagles, I don't see a lot of playoff teams that are moving on from their head coach. So I think, if you're looking like Belichick for a team that's ready to go win a Super Bowl, um, you can't really think of a team with more talent than the Dallas Cowboys. So Who knows? But I think dealing with Jerry Jones would be too much for him in the spotlight and all the crap you have to deal with being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys might be a little too much for him. But at the end of the day, you know, who knows what'll happen. But um let's get into final thoughts for tonight. What let's try to end it on a positive note because this is going to be, this is a very negative day and a very negative way to end the season. So, Cowboy Reg, for our listeners out there, if there were some positive takeaways from the 2023-2024 season, what would what would you say?
Too soon, man. That's what I'm going to say. Too soon. It's too soon for me to answer that question because I have nothing but negatives in my mind right now. What a disappointment this season was. I mean, the only positive I can say is we were NFC East champs. But if Philadelphia comes out Monday night and wins that
Right, it
very,
just
very
goes away.
winnable, the winnable game, they, I mean, it's not. They should walk over Tampa. They should win that game, and then they're the better team in the end. And that's sad because everything was handed to you, and you just let it slip away today. Disappointing. So the only positive could be if Philly loses Monday, and then you could say you were the best team in your division. If you want to say if that's any positive, that would be it.
Yeah, it's hard to me to think of a lot of positives here, and honestly, I don't really care if Philly goes and wins their first game. I don't think they're going too far, but I see your mindset there and your thought process. That makes a lot of sense to me. I guess you just hope for carnage in the playoffs and a lot of teams that have, top teams that have disappointing performances that overshadow the Cowboys, but that's going to be really hard to do, and I don't think we'll see that. So we're just going to have to eat this one, and um, it's another very disappointing season for the Dallas Cowboys. And as a fan, and you're probably testing your fandom right now, so you're going to question why do I follow this team, and why do I continue to put myself through this torture? And hey, I'm right there with you, and I understand that. So we'll see what this offseason brings. If there's any positives that I could say is that, you know, you you never know when you never know in the off season what's going to happen that brings you more hope, and that's going to happen this year for Cowboys fans. There's going to be something that happens in the off season that we're going to hang our hats on and have hope for next season because we do every year. This is still a very talented team with a lot of young players, and I don't think our window is completely closed yet. I think it's very slim, and I think it's probably, unless they blow this team up, you really have one more shot at this thing. But this really felt like the year to do some damage. And at the end of the day, I think San Francisco had the overall better team. Um, and on the AFC side, there are some pretty dangerous teams that I don't think we had a great shot at winning the Super Bowl, but I think this was our chance to at least move past the rounds we have in years, in the last couple of years, and we should have made the NFC Championship game this year. And if we lost that game in a close game to San Francisco, I would have been okay with it, but I'm not going to be okay with this result. So a lot of changes to come, um, but hopefully this makes a an NFC Championship in the future a little sweet. So remember, um, we will win something someday. Everyone has to, right? I think. So, it
Well,
will
hey,
come.
there's 32 teams, right? So we're now in a 29-year drought. So, and we're still within the margin of error there every
Yeah,
32
that is very
years.
true.
So within the next 3 years, guys, we got this. In the
Yeah.
meantime, my advice is to drink heavily.
That's definitely one way to do it. Um, but keep the faith out there, Cowboys Nation. Try and, you know, stay away from anything extremely negative. We encourage you to continue to be Cowboys fans. If you want to go to another team, go ahead. But this will really test your
Yeah.
fandom, and just realize that when the Cowboys do win something, that it's gonna make this loss worth it in the end. Hopefully, this ignites something in the organization that this does not happen again. That's what I'm hoping for. But hey, that's going to be tough. But any final thoughts, Cowboy Reg, on the season before we wrap this show up? And we'll continue to talk Cowboys news in the offseason. But any further reactions from this game other than it sucked?
The game was terrible. The season was great. It was a roller coaster ride. It was a great finish. It was fun down the stretch. For them to pull that out somehow, get past Philly, couldn't have been sweeter. But you flush all that down the toilet today, unfortunately. So leaving a negative note on the season. But the only positive note for me is the curiosity of what's going to happen next. As you said, something's going to happen. Coaching changes, quarterback changes, free agency signings. Something's going to happen, and that excites me that we can look forward to changes. Changes are always exciting.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, we have plenty of time to think about what this team is going to look like in the future. And, we still have a good team, and a lot of the same pieces are going to be there next year. So I still think this is a team next year that has a good shot at getting back into the playoffs. Um, but we will see. And like you said, the curiosity, we're going to be down for a few weeks, but as soon as the off-season madness happens, there's going to be something that's going to give us hope again, and we're going to be ready to be hurt again in 2024, 2025. Um, like you said, it was a great season, a terrible ending, but here we are. It's still fun to be a Cowboys fan. We still have a great um, we have the best fan base in the NFL, whether you like it or not, and we get to be the center of conversation for the entire NFL every day, every week, because we cannot stay out of people's heads, whether it be good or bad. So someone's always talking about your team, and when you win, that feels there's no better feeling, and when you lose, there's no worse feeling. So it is what it is. You know what you signed up for. Um, but overall, disappointing ending to the season, but we will be back in the situation again and hopefully on the other side of this result. So that is all we have for the post game. Packers 48, Cowboys 32. The Cowboys season for the 2023-2024 year is over. We will be continuing to push out these podcasts over the off season, and hopefully we'll have some fun in the future. So again, thank you for listening. We'll be back. Please subscribe to our channel and leave any comments that you have from this season or this playoffs. Our video comments can be your chance to vent. So please leave some questions in there, leave some comments, and we will see you next time. Good night,
Peace out,
Cowboys
guys.
Nation. Later.
We'll be back.